In the name of God the Almighty, peace to you. Today I will speak about Moses as he was the previous warner. Regarding history and specific time of Moses' story or life, we know very little. We cannot determine exactly at what year he was in Egypt and when exactly the Exodus happened. However, there are some scholars who agree that it happened around 3,500 years ago. Uh, so what was the world looked like, what the world looked like during Moses' days? Of course, we don't have too much information in history books about that. Uh, Apart from what is being relied upon from tablets and archaeological findings and all the sort, and of course all of that related to the accounts written mainly by the leaders who won battles back then. And but through the religious text or the holy text, we have some insight on about what the world looked like back in the days. What we have, or what the holy text agreed upon, that the Pharaoh who was in power back then, I personally believe it has to be someone who had a long reign and he was so powerful. For me, the most, you know, a proper candidate for the Pharaoh of the Exodus should be Ramses II, because in his time or his mandate, Egypt reached the peak of its power, and also he lived long life, and because what we know or what the holy text agreed upon, that when Moses came to warn the Pharaoh, and when God sent the plagues, it took years. It's not a matter of a month or a couple of years. It could be a decade or over. That means the same Pharaoh that should have been remained in power, and that's why it's highly likely it should be Ramses II. And also, the Bible and the Torah do not mention that the Pharaoh was saved after the what happened in the Red Sea. Uh, However, the Quran mentioned that his body was saved. That means he could have survived the event, and then he repented and changed his ways. Because when we look at at, at the history of, or recorded history, what historians agreed upon, that Ramses II died of an old age, at an old age, but he was suffering from arthritis and many deformation in his body, and that could mainly caused by deep wounds during battles, and that's highly likely the wound he could have carried after what happened to him in the Red Sea. So, and also when we see the capital of Ramses, which have been displaced completely by natural events, I am more convinced than ever that he is the Pharaoh of the Exodus. Because also Egypt after Ramses II fell gradually from power and until it's no more. So for me personally, and that's what I have written in a book I published in 2014, that Ramses II is the most proper candidate for the Pharaoh of the Exodus. However, there are some documentaries I have seen lately on YouTube and other places on the internet that speak about another Pharaoh, but speaking about the events, they base their research about when the plagues happen in Egypt, and they did some archaeological research. I mean, on the ground. Of course, they have a point to make there, but for me, it's very difficult to rely on what we have as information about something happened thousands of years ago. We can hardly know now for sure fake news from good news when we are just living it. So, and with all the technologies available. So how I'm gonna, it's not about the story of the plagues or how they happen. It, many events could happen in history and never recorded. So for me, I take my information as I said, because I base my kind of quest for the Pharaoh of the Exodus about the length of time of the Moses message. And so it took years and maybe a decade and more, and there is no one who remained in power in that period of time of the pharaohs, uh, who uh, remained in power for some 12 years, 13 years or more, other than Ramses, who reigned maybe 30 years or 40 years. I'm not sure, I'm not now remembering the numbers. However, I remember when I did my quest, I looked carefully of what we have between our hands of recorded history. And I'm not saying that my information or my analysis is 100% the truth. However, I believe it's the closest to the truth. Uh, so what the world looked like back then, because many people believe that when God sends a warning or before a punishment, that means people do not recognize God or do not believe in a God, or they are not worshiping God. That's what the people take things superficially and understand this when cycles of civilization have ended dramatically or something. But it's not the case, because if we look at in the holy text about the conversation that took place between Moses, his brother Aaron, and the Pharaoh and his man, uh, we can notice clearly that when God first asked Moses to go to the Pharaoh and warn him, he told him to speak to him gently and nicely, so he may remember and he may fix his ways. So that's how God commanded Moses first time to go to the Pharaoh. He ordered him to speak to him gently. So in a way that he could be convinced that the way he's leading his people and leading, because Egypt was the most powerful nation over the earth at the moment. So, and when what we see of the record of history and the what we have as sources in the holy text, that the the policy of the pharaohs at the time was divide and conquer. That means they have, took specific race or specific ethnic group for themselves, that they are the godlike, they are the wealthiest, and they are the most powerful, and they are better than the others. And of course, justice is not the same for all. And while they took everybody else around and there, because I believe personally that we know, I mean, through recorded history, we know very little about how much powerful was Egypt and how much technology they possessed. Because I believe the entire African continent and even more towards Asia was under the pharaohs. Even although the Nile and around it was the main cities and the main, powerful positions. However, the entire North Africa, specifically, it was all for them, and it was different than now. It wasn't all deserts and the sort of. So. We have to understand this because many people take all what they remember from the Egyptian civilization is just what we have of pyramids uh, and the sites, the historical sites that still we see around us today, around the Nile. But I believe the civilization, the Egyptian civilization, was the most powerful African civilization that ever existed, and it was the most powerful on earth. And as I said, they took people onto ethnic, they, divided them into ethnic groups, and they have, scales of A, B, C on priorities and with whom they want to trade or with whom they want to give powerful positions and the sort of. So there was no equality in their society. There was clear racism or clear favoritism, and specifically against the people who are looking different, like the children of Israel, even though they have lived in the land for uh, centuries. And many historians now today question whether the pyramids were built by the pharaohs really or by the ancient and the most valuable, uh, godly person who ever walked the earth, which was Enoch. And Enoch lived between in the period between Adam and Noah. That means long ago, some maybe even 10,000 years ago or more. Um, so if what we have of information now, or I mean, what the historians starting to discover now or agree upon, that means we have to rewrite the complete history. So there is a large gaps. It's not all minor gaps about what we know about our own history as a human race. So we just, merely guessing most of the time. But what we agree upon, as I said, that the pharaohs were, dividing communities, and in order to enslave them, in order to use them and abuse them, and the sort. So that's one of the main reason God sent Moses to, and of course they built cities and they were also have a mighty army that conquered the lands around the place and took everything in power, using power. That was the main command to Moses in order to order the pharaohs. And if we go back to the story of Moses before he went into Egypt to, start the warning with his brother Aaron, his story when he was in the Midian lands, um, when someone of his own, ethnic group, or you can call political party back then, or whatever group he belonged to, when he asked him to help him against someone who was attacking the other guy, or that what he informed Moses, that the other person is attacking him. So Moses went on and fought with the other guy and killed him. So that was a clear message. And then after that, Moses knew that he made a mistake and repented to God and asked him forgiveness. And that's why, because God found him very sincere in his repentance, and because he learned the lesson that we should not agree to attach ourselves to specific labels. We are all equal, regardless of our skin color or our background or whatever. So that was a very important message that many read it in the holy text and do not pay attention to it. So I am here again to remind you of this. So Moses, when he repented about what he did, and God found him sincere, then he commanded him that he should go to Egypt and warn the Pharaoh and ask him to fix his ways and to free the children of Israel and stop dividing people into and into groups and with favoritism and not equal in rights and responsibilities and all this problem. So that's how the world looked like. And if I look now around, if we look now around ourselves, where are the most powerful nations are, whether in China, United States, here in Europe, we have seen now the most targeted groups are the one who are divided into labels like sexual orientation, transgenders, or gays, or bisexuals, or a religious group like Muslims, or for example, the minority of Christians in a Muslim country, they are targeted. The minority of Muslim in a Western country or in China are targeted. We have seen now the Uyghur group. We have seen in Myanmar the Rohingya. We have seen, we are seeing in Russia what, for example, Jehovah Witnesses are facing, or the gay community. So there is the same thing is still happening all over the place. In the United States and UK and Europe and China and Myanmar, regardless of, I don't care how much we speak about human rights, I lived it firsthand. So I don't want to, you to believe that the West is having the slogan of equality, but when you live inside, there is nothing about that. And if you go to France and if you ask any one who's originally from Africa, of any other nation other than white skinned, you will know that when you go to apply to a job, they divide, every company divide the candidates two levels, A, B, C, uh, regarding their skin color. The French comes first, then European second, Western European second, Eastern European third, African fourth, Asian five, or the same level, and then the last one could be someone who's from, I don't know, Muslim background or so. So there are divisions in every society. I don't care how much we speak about human rights. I lived it firsthand. I don't need someone else to tell me that I am not someone who's bringing a propaganda, or I have an agenda, or I have favoritism for East over the West, or the West over the East. I am someone who speaks the truth as it is. So it's the same atmosphere that was during the Pharaoh's days is now existing, and even worse, all over the place. Not a single country that such, racism or divisions do not exist. So now we are living almost in the same, lifestyle, if you like, for individuals, the same way the pharaohs was. However, of course, the population back then wasn't as large as now, and the nations wasn't as numerous as now. That's why God sent gradually plagues like the blood and the frogs and the locusts and the lice and all the sort before bringing on the pandemic, which I believe exactly is the same like the COVID-19 we have today. So now he started straightforward with the COVID-19 because that level is required, because now, as I said, we are living in a more populous world, and corruption is all over the place, and divisions and hatred all over the place, not in a single entity. However, it's mainly caused by a culture supported mainly by countries, big countries like United States of America. So we have this sense of culture of fear and divisions, which is giving favoritism for the wealthy and a very small percentage of the world population over the rest. So the same thing is happening again. This time I am the messenger, I am the new Moses, and I have came to warn, and I've warned the United States, the UK, and the Europe, and also, of course, I know that China uh, will have also its share of the punishment. And I explained what the requirements from heavens to bring equality and justice on earth. And I explained all these things, but it seems no one is listening and no one wants to listen. God has no problem in erasing everybody and renewing the earth as it happened before. So Moses, when he came to the pharaohs, he came with a warning, and when they didn't uh, answer favorably, uh, he was asked by God to leave the land with those who believed with him, and he started after the Exodus. He gave him a new balance to rule, a new balance and a new, code of conduct, new commandments in order to rule the earth wisely. So he gave the children of Israel the power, and so they inherited the earth, uh, or the power over the earth. Uh, and they were asked, as I said, to follow a specific code of conduct. And also God have, at the beginning of that phase, he activated for them a fifth dimensional world, which they walked in and lived, I don't know what the length of time they did, but they didn't like it. Say they asked God to have back things they used to have here on the three-dimensional. So he told them, go then descend again to the three-dimensional Egypt, and there they went again. The portion of them went to Egypt, portion towards Judea and the Canaanite lands. So that's how the story unfolded after the Exodus, and what started with Moses is now ending, and the children of Israel still in power. However, now the Chinese is taking over, and they are both for me worse than each other. Because as I said, I speak the truth as it is. I'm not trying to favor anybody on anybody. We are living in a world full of corruption. However, of course, there are degrees and levels. There are the someone who's bad, someone who's worse. So, however, as we can see, the pandemic is ravaging in all countries almost. So we have problem in our hands. God sent new requirements. I informed you all about. If you keep turning deaf ear and blind eye, we will be facing more and more trouble. And as I said, God could pick very few number of people and start with them a final cycle of civilization or so, or he could to simply bring the final judgment on everybody, bring the death back to life, and just give each and every person of us what his work and intentions and thought deserve. Uh, so that's it, how things will go from now on. So I hope that I've explained properly how Moses was a previous warner, and what the world looked like back then, and it's very similar too much to what we are facing today regarding social divisions and hateful, unjustified hatred, and inequality and injustice and abuse and racism and all the sort. So that, however, today we are facing even more trouble with the pollution and abuse of nature. And so today, definitely, we have a larger problem on our hands, as the entire world, as I said, is corrupt. However, there are percentages or levels and degrees of the corruption and the bloodshed going on. We have plenty millions of refugees. We have plenty driven out, many people driven out of their homes. We have millions of homeless people, where we have very few owning large houses, luxurious houses all over the place, and they are almost empty every day. So we are having a very huge problem, and nobody is tackling anything. We have very irresponsible governments and leaders, and United Nations is just a ghost or shadow. It has never been useful for anything actually. And maybe the most striking example of its failure after the world, since its birth after the World War II. If we look back at the 90s, when the massacres of the when the Bosnian massacred the when the Serbians massacred the Bosnians, while the United Nations watchers were just watching. Peacekeepers, they didn't do their job, they didn't do anything. So it's a ghost, it's a fake organization, and it's enough for me that since the start of the Syrian conflict, I used to donate every month to organizations, because you cannot go there, and organization like Save the Children, I used to donate for them every month. And then all of a sudden I heard in the news that they awarded Tony Blair a humanitarian award for his work, and that was just took me completely out of my head, because how on earth every blind person can see that this person is a liar, is a manipulator? How on earth you could give him a humanitarian award while he was behind the starving of millions of Iraqi children, and displacement, and all this problems that's still going in Iraq up till now. So since then, I decided to not trust anymore any of these organizations, and I stopped. And I now using as I can channels through people I know or family members or something, in order to be sure that the money I am giving, for example, or what I'm donating, is reaching really people who are in need, is not going to some corrupt organization, fake humanitarian workers, and all the sort. So we are living in a world that you cannot trust anymore anyone who's in powerful position, any of these organizations who claim to be humanitarian. And we have seen again and again that all these branches of the United Nations who have been working in Syria, mainly a big portion of the aid has been going to the Assad people and followers. So there is a big injustice going on, and still going on. And look at what the weather is now doing to those refugees camps. While, as I said, there are plenty of housing possibilities all over the place, but there is no responsible beings in power. There is no real humanitarian workers out there. We are having a huge, uh, unbalanced world, which has been taken upside down completely. It's now to fix things. It's now time to literally unfuck this world. This is the message. This is the warning. If people in power and people do not protest or demand what I have been requiring, you can go into the previous videos. that means we are going to be punished and severely. That's it from me today. Bye for now.